Haywood from CraftSanity.com, and today I'm here with another tutorial. This time I'm going to show you guys how to make rugs. And this might be the most comfortable rug in the world. I mean, I shouldn't maybe make that kind of a declaration, but you can make one yourself and see if it's true. We are going to use the CraftSanity rug loom. This has been redesigned very recently, and it is now part of the Kindred loom series that I am rolling out this summer into fall. And the first thing we're going to do is show you how to warp the loom. And the rug that's over here, this is a completed plaid design. That this is a little more complicated, but it looks more complicated. It's really not that hard to make at all. A lot of the videos I've been doing are showing just the plain weave structure with, you know, one color, usually a solid color. So we're going to get, now that some of you have had a chance to see some of those videos, we're going to get a little more complex. And I just have some colors that I picked out. I like to go bright. I recognize that a lot of you folks might have more subdued colors in your home, and that's fine. Actually, I do too. But when I sit down to weave a blanket or a rug or a scarf, I tend to be attracted to bright colors. But there's definitely a place for these subdued colors in the house as well. So you can decide what you want to do, what colors you want to use, and I'm going to just play with some bright colors over here today. So we're going to get started. Okay, to start out, I have a strand coming from outside and a strand coming from the center. If you're using a regular skein of yarn, you can just use an outside and the inside piece. So this is a double thickness. That's what makes this nice and soft. So I'm going to come down here to the top left of the loom. Well, actually, this is not the top left the way it's configured right now, but you actually can tie on at any point. I'm going to tie down over here, and once that's secured, we're ready to start warping. So I'm going to just come straight down and go around. Okay, now we're going to continue to warp the loom. And you don't have to count out exactly how many pegs you go around for each color. I never pay that close of attention. I just decide when I want to switch. I have decided one thing. I've decided that I want the blue to be the dominant color. So there will be more blue than any other color. When you look at the blanket, or when you look at the rug I have over here, the turquoise is the dominant color on that one. So I'm going to just go around a few more pegs and then I'm going to switch to one of my other colors. Alright, I think we're good here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to snap that off. And again, I'm going to grab both the inside strand there and the outside. Alright, so now we're ready to tie on the yellow here. And to tie on that color, I'm going to kind of eyeball this and figure out, like, okay, you want it to be, you know, not super tight. I'm going to just tie a knot just by wrapping the yarn around my fingers, and I pull through, and I'm going to just want that knot to land behind the peg. Just like that. And just a note about tension. This should be fairly loose. It shouldn't be sagging down to the bottom of the surface behind the loom, but it should be definitely movable. Otherwise the weaving will be very difficult. And this yellow is really bright, so you don't need a lot of it. You can kind of just put a splash of it there and then switch up the colors like that. Now here I have to make a decision about what I'm going to do next. Do I want to go back to the blue or bring in another color? I think I'm just going to go right ahead and bring in another color. Okay, so we have the two ends once again. And I'm going to pour. Okay, now we're ready to rock with another color here. Okay, and one of the things that's nice when you're doing a plaid, what adds interest, is if the sections of color are different widths. So I'm going to go less than the blue but more than the yellow here. Okay, so now I have more than the yellow, and I'm going to switch back to my blue at this point. And again, I'm not doing this in any pre-planned fashion. You certainly could come up with a pattern. If you're going to make multiple rugs and you want them to be the same, you definitely could take note of how many pegs you go around and all that. And the reason why I'm tying the yarn on at the end is because I like the fact that it's not going to be a knot that I'm going to walk on, because I don't like to walk on those knots. So I like to keep all my joins on the side. Okay, so what I did is I actually turned the loom to finish warping, since I couldn't, it's hard to reach all the way across. So the ends that I was tying on are over there now. And what I'm going to do is come down to this corner. And because this loom is going to be woven with a double strand of this really chunky yarn, I'm not going to have a ton of space on the loom. So I'm not going to go in that first one. I'm going to go around the second peg here. I'm going to skip the first one and go around the second one. And then, this is the part where we get to move off the deck surface here, and I'm going to tip this up. Okay, so now that we are all done with the warping, we are going to start weaving. And the first pass, I do a shortcut. I go across all of the pegs, and that doesn't look like weaving, but trust me, we're going to be weaving. This first row here, well, it's not really a row, this first strand, it's a double strand. Everything else we're going to be weaving with 4 strands of yarn. So just know you didn't make a mistake. It's okay that there are 2 here. In the end there will be 4, because we're going to weave a piece back through at the very end. But for right now, we're just going to treat that as it's going to just be by itself. And so what we're going to do is skip that strand of 2, move over to this first double loop that goes around the peg. We're going to pop that off and put it over that strand stretched across. We're going to skip the next one and then take the yarn from the third peg and put it over. We're going to do that every other one across the way. And this is going to establish our weaving pattern. And this helps prevent mistakes, because when you work with this double thickness, it's so bulky that it's hard to see, especially when you're working with the same color yarn next to each other. It gets a little tricky. Okay, now that the weaving pattern is established here, this is our first row. We have over-under pattern established here. What I'm going to do is put in a dowel, and this is going to serve as our shed stick. And what this is going to allow us to do is weave across very quickly every other pass across the loom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow what I've already done here and just lift that yarn over the dowel all the way across. And what this is going to do also is try to help us cut down on mistakes. Alright, our shed stick is in place. We have that first row of weaving done, and now I'm going to go across again, and this time I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to pick up the yarn that I went over the last time. And what you can do at first, if you just want to go one at a time, just grab one grouping of yarn each time. That's one way to do it. Or as you become more experienced and more, if you want to go a little faster, you can grab about 4 groupings and pull the loop through here. I'm holding, and notice I'm holding the yarn like a loop, as if I'm doing a giant pot holder weave. So it's always in a loop, and the objective is to get from the left side of the loom to the right and go and get that loop around the peg. That's what I'm going for each time. And I kind of open this up, because see, I almost went without grabbing that one. So you kind of push back what's on the next peg, and make sure you're grabbing all that yarn. If you do end up skipping one, you can backtrack and reweave it, or you can just keep going. It's not a huge tragedy. Okay, so the first 2 rows of weaving are done, and now I can show you how the shed stick works. So I keep it out of the way when I'm not going across the way the shed stick is going to help me. I kind of move it down. But when every other row, what this allows is I can reach through and I can pull that yarn, pull the loop right through. So I'm everything on this side of that shed stick, it's already has my pattern established, and I can just reach right through. As you can see, this is a lot faster than me trying to sort it out myself. So every other row is going to be pretty speedy. Okay, so I did wove a little bit of blue, and now I'm going to bring in some orange. This is the same approach as I did when I was warping the loom. Just tie a knot, kind of position it so it is behind the peg. And I'm probably going to untie these to weave in the ends, but for right now I just want to have it be secure. And I'm going to just resume weaving like before. So the loom is now completely full, and as you can see here, I did not try to squeeze in one last row here. When you get done weaving, you get to kind of decide when you're done. If you see gaping holes in here, then you need to keep weaving. But sometimes with this bulky yarn, especially if you're weaving with 2 strands at once, you can just get to the top, and if you're close to that, I mean, it's not worth really wrestling with it. You could actually break pegs on your loom if it's so tight and it's so uncomfortable to weave, and it's just not worth it. So this is where I'm stopping here. And now what I'm going to do, I have this double strand of yarn, and remember, along this side everything was in a group of 4 except over here there was just that strand that had the just two pieces of yarn going down. So what I'm going to do to equal that, to even that out, now no one's really going to notice if you don't even that out, but I kind of like to even it out. So what I'm going to do is come back in here, and we're going to weave this strand. I just measured it out so it's down past the length of the loom here. So I know I'm going to have a little bit extra. I'm going to have a yarn tail at the end, and I'm just going to follow this line right here. So what I'm going to do is just come up. I'm not wrapping around any pegs or anything. I'm just going to weave this in. And this first one I only go under 1. And then I come up here and just want to make sure that that's not pulled too tightly. And I'm just following the under-over weave pattern that's already there. And I keep adjusting this until I get a little bit further away. And depending on how tight it is, you can go under 2, but that's a little more difficult. So you can decide if you want to have it just be easy, or if you want to go under 2. So the end that I was weaving in is right here. So I wove that in. We're good to go there. And I'm actually going to start, I untied all these knots too. So where I tied yarn on to change, each time I switched colors for yarn, I untied all the knots. The knots are too bulky to just leave there. The edge of your rug would look a little strange without those knots. So this does mean I'm going to have quite a few ends to weave in here, but I think it'll be worth it in the end. So I'm going to leave this yarn tail right here because I'm going to come all the way around. And when you're doing these rugs, it's nice to make sure that your last loop you have a yarn tail to pull through it. That helps secure things, because if you're left with a loop, what are you going to do with that? You need to be able to tie it down to something. So, okay, I'm going to start in this corner, pull the first loop off, grab the next one, and pull it through that first one that was on my hook. Just going to move over the next peg, grab the loop, and this is a doubled loop. Okay, I think in this one, oh, there's where I did it. I had put 2 on one peg. See, that happens sometimes. And in that case, just do it separately. But you should have a double loop on each one, meaning there's 2 strands of yarn here, and there's 2 strands of yarn here. Treat those as one bulky loop. Okay, so now when you get to this, what should you do? Well, I started out in the craft world as a baby crocheter. I think I was about 5 when I learned to crochet. So I have that's my fallback. So I'm gonna make like I'm crocheting here and pull up a loop right there. Okay, and let that tail just go. I'm gonna pull up a loop with this orange in the same manner, and I'll come back to those in the end. Right now I'm just trying to have a nice finished edge. And I'll come back and secure those, because you're like, whoa, those aren't secure. They're not really. I'm going to need to do some weaving in, but they're secure enough for right now. So I'm going to keep going until I get to that next end. And then here we go again. I'm going to take this orange, just pull it up, pull a loop up with the yellow. And what that does is it'll give you a smooth edge. See, that's nice and smooth. If I left them as knots, there'd be like this giant knot right here. And it kind of looked like your rug has been through some trauma. And if you're going to give this as a gift or put it in your own house or sell it, you want to make sure that your rug is a nice smooth finished edge. So now I'm almost done removing this from the loom, but when you get down to your last side here, the weight of the rug will start to make it a little complicated when you're removing the last part. So what I do is just kind of push it back on over those pegs and just have a little gap here so you still have room to remove your loops. And since I don't have any joins on this side, no color changes that were tied on this side of the loom, I can go quickly. Okay, we're down to our last few loops here, and sometimes you only pull one through and just kind of go backtrack and regroup. So down to that last loop, and that's where having that end comes in handy here. So what I usually do is kind of go in on the side, pull that loop up, and pull it through. And then I usually do one more. Actually, you can just pull it all the way through at that point. And then this will be the first end that I'll weave in. And I usually try to pick up the yarn right through the middle of that stitch on the end, that chain stitch. I just come up right in the middle of that, pull it back through here, following the weave structure. Now, I'm not pulling really tight. You want to pull it enough that it stays, but not being, you don't want to alter the shape of the rug. And this is a pretty thick rug, and those ends should stay in there. And if an end works its way back out, just grab a crochet hook and weave that back in. It's not a huge deal. Okay, so now we're moving into the section where we have all these ends here. Now these are not knotted. They were pulled up as loops, but they are not knotted. So if someone was to really pull at this could come undone. So we have a little bit of finishing work to do. And I'm just going to come in with my crochet hook. And I'm going to pull it up, pull up a loop, and pull through. Okay, and just tighten that. And then, so I've effectively created a knot right there, but it's much smaller than if I was, for example, if I was to tie these two together, which I'm not going to do this tightly, but look how large, I mean, it's a big, massive, it's pretty big. So right here, by just pulling up that loop and slip stitching it through, you can effectively make that knot disappear by just coming in here and pulling that yarn through. And the reason why I do think it's important to have some kind of knot there is because if this goes through the wash, and I wash anything I make like this, I wash on gentle. You can hand wash it. This yarn, obviously follow the instructions of the yarn that you're using. This is yarn that is washable, but I tend to be very gentle with my handmade stuff, so I put it on a gentle cycle. It's nice. So again, I just work this back in a little ways, and then I'll come back through and trim these. I'm going to put my hook in, and there's really, if you're like, oh no, I don't know where to put the hook in, don't worry. This is not a huge problem. Okay, so this is my tail of yarn. I'm just wrapping it around my hook, pulling up that loop, and then pulling that tail through it. Okay, and just tighten that. Okay, now that's not like, you know, so tight it's like Fort Knox. You could untie that if you needed to. I don't know why you would want to, but I'm going to come back in here. There's a little bit of work that goes into the plaid rug beyond a regular rug. So you're going to have a lot of ends that you got to get work back in. But as you can see here, this, and here's another little trick. You can make this end here, you can go below and pull that through and kind of get it to kind of, and then cut it so it's on the other side. So it kind of goes between the orange and the blue here, and just trim that off. And it's okay if the little ends peek out a little bit. This is pretty plush. It'll be barely noticeable. So you'll be investing some time weaving in these. I have a little bit of work ahead of me here, but as you can see in this section, you really can't tell where those ends were. So it does not add, if you're wondering like, oh my gosh, is that going to be really like lumpy to walk on? No, you're not going to notice. And just treat these, you know, work at one, don't work in a big wad of 4, and try to weave the color that's in your hand back with the color. Because if I weave the yellow in over here, it's going to look not so great. So be patient, put in a good movie in, binge watch some Hulu, do whatever you need to do, and pretty soon you will be standing on your lovely rug. Okay, so here it is, the finished product. It took a little bit to get all those ends woven in, but not that long, and now it's done, and another colorful rug to add to the collection. And I'm standing on the one that I was standing on at the beginning of all this. So you can do this in a very simple way, just by having a couple strands of a chunky yarn and weaving that way. With this one I did not have to weave in a bunch of ends, so it makes it a little bit easier for a first rug, but I did want to show you a more complex project that isn't really that complex when you break it down.